Anne Frank once wrote in her diary, "Terrible things are happening outside. At any time of day and night, poor, helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated." If I told you that 97.4% of the people arrested by Nazi Germany were in fact innocent of any wrongdoing, you would accept my statement as entirely plausible. That's what fascists do. They use the machinery of the state to target vulnerable communities, manufacture criminals, and normalize mass repression. But here's the reality. This week, Trump's own Department of Justice confirmed that 97.4% of the people ICE has arrested over the past several weeks in Chicago have no criminal record whatsoever. None. Zilch. They are being seized, denied due process, and subjected to illegal detention and torture and abuse. This is not border security. This is not law and order. This is the state using its power to terrorize a community because it is politically useful to do so. And worst of all, this is not isolated to Chicago only. Let's address this. If you're just tuning in, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can continue to create this content on YouTube and beyond. First of all, this is a national epidemic. The LA Times likewise reports that in the recent Los Angeles immigration raids, the majority of those arrested had no criminal history. In fact, more than 90% of the people that ICE detained in the Los Angeles region had no criminal record at all. And over the weekend, the Trump regime elected once again to escalate violence, this time raiding communities in Charlotte, North Carolina, and arresting more than 100 people in a single weekend operation. Now, if later reporting reveals that once again the overwhelming majority had no criminal history, I would not be surprised. It will only confirm the pattern that we already know to be true. My friends, this is not what due process looks like. This is instead collective punishment dressed up as policy, not unlike what Nazi Germany did during and before the Holocaust. One of the most dangerous things happening right now is the framing of these abuses as normal partisan disagreements. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. Let me make that clear. This is not Democrats versus Republicans, because it is not Democrat versus Republican to ask whether the government can imprison people without evidence, deny them counsel, or torture them in custody. This is rule of law versus rule by fear. The Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution does not say, quote, "No citizen shall be deprived of life or liberty without the due process of law." Instead, it says no person shall be deprived life or liberty without the due process of law. And that includes immigrants. It includes asylum seekers. It includes people accused of being undocumented. It includes every human being inside our borders. When a government decides certain communities are beneath the protection of due process, it is not just violating their rights. It is rewriting the basic terms of who counts as fully human under the law. And this is exactly what Nazi Germany did. As the Holocaust Encyclopedia reports, and I'm quoting directly here, two distinct laws passed in Nazi Germany in September 1935 are known collectively as the Nuremberg Laws: the Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor. These laws embodied many of the racial theories underpinning Nazi ideology. They would provide the legal framework for the systemic persecution of Jews in Germany. Now, what does this have to do with the United States? Well, it's not unlike the United States Supreme Court recent ruling in September of this year that race can be a valid factor in profiling someone's immigration status. This is a horrific break from anti-discrimination laws that ban racial profiling. Now, in that case, law enforcement targeted Latinos based on their ethnicity, not based on any actual illegal activity. See, when Nazi Germany was able to apply that racist principle against German Jews, that fascism soon expanded. It didn't just stop with the German Jews, it expanded to other marginalized communities as well. Again, as the Holocaust Encyclopedia reports, quote, "While the Nuremberg laws specifically mentioned only Jews, the laws eventually extended to black people and Roma and Sinti, known as Gypsies, living in Germany. The definition of Jews, black people, and Roma as racial aliens facilitated their persecution in Germany. End quote. And yet again, it got worse. How did it get worse, might you ask? Well, it got worse because the fascism expanded to other nations in Europe as well. Again, the Holocaust Encyclopedia documents this. It says that during World War II, many countries allied or dependent on Germany enacted their own versions of the Nuremberg Laws. By 1941, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Vichy France, and Croatia had all enacted anti-Jewish legislation similar to the Nuremberg Laws in Germany. This is why this moment today in 2025 America is so dangerous. Rounding up immigrants without criminal histories and throwing them into detention centers is not a tough stance on immigration. No, it is the construction of an authoritarian apparatus that can and will be turned on anyone the regime decides is inconvenient. And now the United States under Trump is set to expand that racist policy internationally. In fact, it already is. As a reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can continue to create this important content. We have to recognize that these aren't just domestic raids. They're escalating to international killings. These abuses do not stop at our borders. The same contempt for due process that shows up in ICE raids is also driving U.S. conduct abroad. So far, Trump has already killed at least 57 fishermen from Venezuela and in the Pacific on the mere accusation that they were narco-terrorists. There was no evidence, no transparency presented, no trial, no congressional declaration of war, just unauthorized executive action used as a license to kill. Now, Trump is openly threatening to invade Venezuela, once again without congressional approval. This is not peace through strength. It is lawless violence justified by rhetoric about terrorists and drug traffickers. Rhetoric that is never seriously or at all scrutinized. Once again, people who are poor, black, brown, and far from the centers of power are treated as inherently expendable. When the United States normalizes extrajudicial killings abroad, it erodes the very norms that are supposed to protect us here at home. The idea that a human being can be executed on a label alone without scrutiny is the same idea that allows the government to throw families into indefinite detention on a label alone. The scale and tools may differ, but the logic is the same. And the madness of the propaganda machine is in overdrive. To justify these abuses, the Trump-aligned media ecosystem has to invent increasingly ridiculous stories and excuses. One recent example, on Fox News, commentator Scott Bessent, who's of course in Trump's cabinet, insisted that the high beef prices were not caused by tariffs or by Trump's decision to blow up our trade relationships or by the shift of major markets like China to importing beef from Argentina instead of the United States, or to the United States giving Trump giving $40 billion in tax dollars to Argentina that could go to our farmers. No, according to Scott Bessent, beef prices are high because migrants are allegedly crossing the border with their cows. I wish I was making this up. We are meant to believe that a heavily militarized border, which separates desert, terrain, river crossings, and physical barriers, is being defeated by cattle in transit. I'm assuming that MAGA logic is that once you strip away all the noise, if a cow can jump over the moon, it can jump over the wall. It would be laughable if it wasn't just so stupid and wasn't being used to justify regimes of raids, detentions, and shattering families. Propaganda like this has a purpose. It keeps the base angry at the most powerless people in the system, while the most powerful, those who've caused the economic crisis in the first place, gutted protections and hoarded wealth, those powerful people escape accountability entirely. The Trump regime's message could not be more clear. White violence is rewarded, non-white existence is punished. We have seen armed militias storm state houses and the U.S. Congress, threaten elected officials, march openly with Nazi symbols, only be described as, quote, very fine people, or treated as political constituency to court, or being pardoned, as Trump pardoned more than 1,600 insurrectionists on January 6th. Meanwhile, Latino families are torn apart in pre-dawn raids, their children traumatized, their legal status questioned, black children zip-tied out naked. Even when they are citizens, ProPublica reports that more than 100 170 citizens have been arrested by ICE. These are not isolated instances. They are part of a coherent, deliberate worldview in which whiteness is presumed innocent and legitimate, while non-white communities are presumed suspect, criminal, and disposable. That worldview is then reinforced through law, through policy, through rhetoric, until it feels normal. Until it feels normal to treat some neighbors as permanent suspects. What we do now is going to determine where this country goes in the coming years, and we have to refuse to be divided. The most important thing I can say in this moment to you is this: do not let yourself be divided by culture wars. This is exactly what authoritarians want. They need you so consumed with hatred and with arguing over flags and slogans and imagined threats that you stop noticing what is happening in the courtrooms, detention centers, international waters, the economy. So whether you're Latino or black or white or Asian or Arab or documented or undocumented or born here or newly arrived, you have a stake in whether the government respects due process of law or not. Because once the precedent is set that some people are beneath the law's protection and some are untouchable, then the list of who qualifies for that category of who does not qualify, that list will expand widely. See, this is not about agreeing on every policy detail. Reasonable people can debate immigration frameworks, asylum processes, and border management. What we cannot legitimately debate, however, is whether human beings deserve basic constitutional protections. On that question, there is no both sides to this. There's only one side that insists on due process, and that is the right side of history. And then there's the other side that is willing to discard due process, and they are on the wrong side of history. Fascism does not announce itself with a label. It creeps through with exceptions. Just this one group, just this one emergency, just this one time. We are already far past that stage, my friends. We are watching mass arrests of people with no criminal history. We are watching citizens questioned for existing in the wrong neighborhood, speaking the wrong language, having the wrong last name, having the wrong skin tone. We are watching our government kill people abroad without proof or oversight. This cannot be normalized. So in conclusion, stand with your neighbors. Stand with Latino communities being targeted today, knowing that what is being done to them is a test of what will be done to all of us tomorrow if we don't speak up. Reject the propaganda that tells you that the real threat is a family seeking work or safety, that the real threat is a government that believes it is accountable to no one. Our task is simple, but it's not easy. That simple task is to defend due process, defend human dignity, and refuse to participate in the dehumanization of any community, in this case, Latino Americans and the immigrant community. Because once we accept that some people do not deserve rights, we have already conceded more than we can ever afford to lose. History is clear on this. Concentration camps are never ultimately just about the first group that is targeted. Immigrants are being used as a test case here, the scapegoat, and the trial run. Once the public is conditioned to accept that some people simply do not deserve rights, expanding that category becomes frighteningly easy, and we cannot let that happen. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe so we can continue to create this content. And if you want to support my work on Substack, you can go to QasimRashid.com/subscribe.